Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking about a very important topic, but obviously something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is sales and more specifically, social selling. And I have an expert with me today to talk about all of those things and more, because there is an art to it, there is a science to it, there's misconceptions around it, there's things that need to be brought up to the surface. So all of you that are listening and watching understand the potential incongruencies, but also the important things that you need to know about how you can shorten the gap between understanding what social selling is and how you can convert those tactics into sales in your business. So with that being said, Tim Hughes, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you, Scott. I'm really excited to talk to you.
We have a great barber. So we go to
the same place.
Yeah,
I always have a short back and polish.
You know, it's one of those things people don't realize the ease of having one less thing to worry about when you get up in the morning, because doing our hair is not something that has to be focused on, so we can focus on everything else. So, you know, Tim, before we dive into all the aspects of social selling and everything that people need to know about it, I always like to go back before we go forward. So if you could rewind the tape and stop it at a particular moment in time that you truly feel was that moment for you, that catalytic moment that kind of set you down the path that you're still currently on moving forward, what would you say is that catalytic moment for you with your journey?
So so in terms of my background, I've been in sales for 25 years, and there was kind of two moments. One was a moment, you know, I'm 1,000 years old. I remember the moment that we were all given PCs and they fired the sales administrator. And over 6 months, 25% of the sales force basically resigned, because they said, we're salespeople, we sit in front of customers, we don't do our own typing. And of course, people look at that now and they laugh. And what I realized at that point was I have to keep up with things that are changing, and in my life I need to keep learning those things. I realized that I had to, to survive and to carry on, I need to do those things. And it was the second point was when I was working in corporate, and I got them to pay for me to do a blogging course. And the person who was running the blogging course said, you need to know what you want to be famous for. And at that point, it was like a lightning bolt basically hit me and said, I want to be famous for social selling. And at that point, I changed my career, and a whole load of things then fell in place because of that. And part of that was understanding that the world has changed. You know, when I first started selling, there wasn't the internet. You actually cold calling, people liked being cold called because they learned about what was going on. You explained to them, people would say, tell us what you do, tell us about the solution, because they were interested. And what's happened is that's completely changed the fact that now people can go online and be curious about what it is and what's going on and learn about those things. And the world has changed so much over the last 10, certainly the last 5 years.
Oh, I could not agree more. And between the two of us, we are not old by any stretch of the imagination, but we have 50 years of sales experience between the two of us. And I can tell you that, when you have two people that have had, as much experience as we have had and continue to have in sales, it's one of those things, just like any other industry or profession or skill, it's ever evolving. And I think what I really continue to lean on is staying educated and staying up to date on everything that's changing, everything that's going on. So piggybacking off of something that you just mentioned, within, I would say, the last 5 years to the present, what do you think has changed the most when it comes to social selling that people need to know about?
I still don't think people recognize the migration that's taken place onto digital and the comfort that people feel, the buyers feel on digital. There is still this view that interruption selling, which has been around, since the 1980s, that you can basically turn up and interrupt somebody and pitch, is the way forward. It just isn't. People just don't put up with that anymore. And that's one of the biggest things. COVID accelerated that. Even my mother, at the beginning of COVID, I had to explain to my mother what Zoom was. She runs wine groups, and they got used to, where they get around and they drink wine and have a chat and stuff. And they were able to do it on Zoom. And that's when an 85-year-old person is comfortable doing this sort of stuff, what do you think people in their 30s who are millennials, they're used to using this technology. And, then they don't want to be disturbed. They don't want to have this onslaught of cold calls and emails. Anyway, when the data shows they don't work anyway.
What was the biggest shift for you personally that you had to make? Not just with COVID, because I completely agree with the pandemic. It really put a lot of things into perspective. My wife and I were already running our online company. We started our company back in 2017 as co-owners. I
Yep.
started it at the end of 2013, early 2014. Then she came in a couple of years into it. But what was the biggest change or shift that you personally had to make with all of the changes to the landscape of selling and sales and social media and everything that's kind of brought us to where we are today?
I think that the big change was actually recognizing the amount of time that you spend online. And we're kind of used to now living our lives online. My mum always says to me, she can't stand, she's 85, and she says she can't understand all these old people sending emails, because she sees email as an old person's thing, because she does everything on Facebook Messenger. And that change that's taken place in terms of not just society, where we're talking about, we could have a conversation about who said what on Twitter or on whatever platform, but that moved also to the way that the business has taken place. And I get people asking me, so how much time should I spend on social? And I often think, so how do you transact business by not being on social? I just don't understand it. And this view that this social media is some sort of thing in the future. We've got people doing multi-million-dollar deals on social media. And the fact that if you're not doing it, you have, the question to them is, are you happy missing out on multi-million-dollar deals? You tell me your pipeline shit, but you're not willing to go on. You're not willing to go where all the pipeline is, which is on social media. And that's the thing and the big thing that we're seeing is that there was a switch that took place in COVID, and that switch changed, and the people the clever people who are doing business, who are not laying people off, who have pipeline, have made that switch into social. And the people that don't understand this are the people laying people off.
I think one of the biggest things for me was understanding that anything that you don't know how to do, you can learn how to do.
Yes.
And if people thought otherwise, they were just making an excuse.
Yeah. My partner's son, when he bought his flat, he did the whole thing up by watching YouTube videos. Now, Luke would say, well, yeah, like, duh. But there's some people that don't understand. Anything that you want to do, there's a YouTube video.
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I talk about this all the time, that there's nothing really new and exciting when it comes to, business. Like, there's nothing ultra revolutionary that has happened. It's just, there's an overabundance of content. There's an overabundance of information. And what happens is people can go down those scroll holes where it just ends up being a black hole of information, and then they can't get themselves out of it. And then they end up doing nothing. And one of the big things that Nancy and I, my wife that is, always suggest is, focusing on the aspects of your business that you need help with, that you're struggling with, that you want to learn about, and only research that specific topic. And don't source out 15 to 18 different people or blogs or websites. Pick a couple, the first 2 or 3, listen to a podcast episode on it, read one book on it. Don't get 18 books on the same subject. That's not going to help you any more than it is right now. And that will help move the needle of your business forward. So, Tim, why do you feel, even today, we're winding down into 2023 into 2024. The pandemic has come and gone, right? There was a huge shift from, offline to online. And people still aren't grasping what has changed in the landscape of social selling, sales in general, and business.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it's because, what's happened is that we went through a door and the door shut, and there's no going back. That change took place, and it doesn't matter how much people say you need to be back in the office. We learned what it was like to work from home, and some people, and all of those skills we picked up. It was 2 years in the various lockdowns. We picked up a lot of skills. Why haven't people picked it up? I think they're still clinging to the past. We had one of my partners, resellers, basically came on a call the other day and said they got into a company, and the person had said they'd had a new sales leader, and the sales leader said, I want you to get on the phones. It worked for me 20 years ago, so it will work for you now. And this is one of the issues, which is that we have with sales and marketing, that we don't have a realization that the world has changed. And that's because quite often people are comfortable in what they're doing. When we talk to people about, if you think about cold calling has a 99% failure rate. Email marketing has a 98% failure rate. But the thing is, people quite often say, well, yeah, but 2% is really good. And you go, well, yeah, I mean, if you want to live like that, if I can show you can get a better response. But actually, people have become so used to such a poor response from events and cold calling and email marketing, they're kind of used to it. So what they do is that they recruit salespeople. So what we're going to do is we're going to recruit more salespeople, because what we need to do is get more salespeople cold calling to get that generate a 99% failure rate. Because the only way that we're going to grow as a business is just to keep doing that, and people just don't get it.
So if you were to, obviously cold calling it's still there, but it's dead. Email marketing obviously is never going to go away, because email is one of the most direct ways, to connect with people. If you were to think about the number one misconception of social selling in what you hear other people say about it, what's that misconception?
The number one is that they think that the sale transacts on social media. So there's a number of things. One is, that they think that the sale transacts on social media. So I've had people say, oh, well, it's no good for me. We have to talk to the clients. No. This is about how you can get conversations with clients at scale. So we're not anti-telephone. In fact, the telephone is a fantastic way of talking to people, just as much as using Zoom and things like that. What we're doing is that we're using social media as the mechanism to actually connect with people, have conversations online that we then basically take onto Zoom or Teams or whatever. The other misconception is that, when you get people sending you connection requests and immediately pitching, they think that that's social selling, and it's not, it's spam. Social selling is about conversations and conversations at scale. It's not about, sending connection requests and then sending spam. It's no different than cold calling on social media. It's social media.
Yeah. And I think people need to understand a couple of different things. Number one, there are more people now than ever on social media.
Yeah.
So you have a larger demographic of people on there. So, and you think about the larger amount of people that are on social media.
60% of the world's population is on social media, active on social media. And active on social media, the average person spends 2 hours, 26 minutes a day on social media. That's not a platform for geeks. That's not a platform where you post pictures of your lunch. That's where people are using social media actively every day for doing personal things, but also doing business.
Yeah. And you think about how many people are in the sales and marketing world that are looking to get the attention of those individuals. So you have to think about, what can you do to bring the eyeballs onto what you're doing, but also the amount of touches that it takes to really get someone into your pipeline, take them through whatever funnel you've built out. It's not an immediate thing. It's not just, oh, they see you once and they buy everything that you have. There is a significant amount of time and effort and nurturing on your part and on your end as the business owner to build that know, like, and trust. Because, I always remind people, what can you do to set yourself apart from everyone else, right? What can you do to make sure that that spotlight that is kind of going back and forth, left and right, how can you get that spotlight to stop and land on you to bring you into the forefront? And the simplest thing I can say, and I would love to hear your take on this, is position yourself as a person of value. People consistently go back to those that put value out there, that aren't just asking for a sale and aren't just, to your point, pitching and selling. You have to give in order to get, right? So what exchange can you give to that person that doesn't necessarily involve monetary right away, that later on down the line, when that hole, that gap, that void in that person's business is very clear and apparent, they're going to remember you and say, you know what? I want to go back to Tim. I got to improve X, Y, and Z, and I'm ready to work with him. So what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I think that what people don't realize is that the buyers are online. We know that buyers are online. We know 60% of the world's population are online. And what they're doing is that they're looking for an expert. They're looking for somebody that's going to help them. They've got business issues and they're looking for somebody that's going to solve them. And 99.9999999% of the salespeople online look like people are going to rip them off. So if I'm a buyer and you look like a salesperson, and all buyers will say, I don't believe a word you say. I don't trust you. Therefore, I'm not going to deal with you. Why would you? It's self. Why as a salesperson would you set yourself as a way to actually harm yourself? This is the thing. We know that buyers are online, except salespeople are setting themselves up so they don't actually get people to walk towards them. We have clients where where buyers walk towards them and say, I think that you can help me. And that those things can turn into multi-million-dollar deals. Because when we see that there's somebody that can actually help us, we still talk in the same way as it from a sales buyer perspective. But it's about, that's how you stand out, by saying, when you say value, it's not value from a salesperson, which is the mistake that often people make, which is they think, well, the value I'm providing is my product. No, it's not. It's only value in the eyes of the beholder of the buyer, and that's the difference. And what people have to do is fundamentally say, what we need to do is we need to show that we have a buyer, and what quite often is called a personal brand. Now, there's actually data. So if you take Matt Dixon's book, The Jolt Effect, which actually looks at 3,000 buying scenarios, 3,000, one of the conclusions that it takes is that each salesperson needs to have a personal brand. He doesn't call it a personal brand. Now, that's the data. Now, lots of people can give lots of opinions about but there is data the data in there is cast iron. Academics would use 3,000 as a sample. The argument about it is over. The organizations and the salespeople are going to win are the organizations that understand that social media is now current, that they need to have a personal brand, and there's a clear business case now to have it.
So with all of that's going on, and obviously the information that people need to know and understand, where do you see social selling going forward in the next 12 to 24 months? What's the biggest change that you see on the horizon for people in regards to social selling for and to their business?
We see that there's been a fundamental shift in terms of so many people come to us and say they have no pipeline. And what organizations have done is that they've done the obvious thing whenever they're not got enough pipeline, is they look at their costs. The two most costly things that they have in their organization is real estate, as you'd call it in the States, and people. So what they've done is that they lay people off. But at some point, they're going to have to come back and actually look at pipeline. And they're not going to get it through cold calling and email and events. So they have to look at modern ways of selling. And the way that what we're seeing is that this isn't just about going on to social media. It's understanding the psychology, the buyer, the psychology of why people buy things in particular ways, the psychology of why people block people, and most of it is converse to this view that sales needs to be a whole bunch of cadences. Sales cadence is killing sales and is killing your organization. And the moment that people actually wake up to that, we have clients that are doing sales cadences and getting nothing, and doing social selling and blowing the results out of the water. It's so obvious that the one's working and one isn't. We're now seeing a lot of use in terms of AI. We're doing a lot of stuff with AI, and it's not just helping us, it's giving us new things that we would never have time or ability to create. Now, we don't use AI for content creation. We actually, most people research now, so some research done from a university that actually showed that if you use ChatGPT to create content, actually it pisses people off. The research shows that, as you said earlier on, there's too much content, and we don't need rubbish content being created by ChatGPT. What we need is great, authentic content. But AI has its place in terms of, for example, we run a number of podcasts. We can AI can create a summary of that podcast. Then what we're actually, one of my team is actually doing is he takes that summary, he puts it into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT is coming up with a 2-minute script for him, which he then basically talks out into video. So he's able to we do a podcast, we get a summary, we're then able to do a clip of this is the summary of the podcast, and he gets 250 views per video on TikTok. 250 isn't like millions, but it's 250 people that he wasn't getting before we were doing that.
Well, that's
so
also
that gives you,
that's like an auditorium full of people, though.
Yeah. And so what he's doing, he's only just started it. So maybe he's building an audience, maybe he's not. But what you get then is the experimentation, and we would never have been able to do that with AI. It's not just a time factor, you just wouldn't have had the ability to do it. So what we're able to do is create, not just when we create content, it's about creating great content that's engaging and authentic, and content that's original as well.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. The fact is that, so I interviewed a gentleman on my podcast. He had a PhD in AI. Yeah. And he basically said AI is helpful, but you have to understand, you have to think of it like a sandwich. He goes, whatever information you pump in there is the bread, but you have to bring the meat, meaning you got to bring your own voice, your own thoughts, your own ideas to it. So love all that. So Tim, as we wind down, before I get to my final question, if someone is interested in learning about you, your company, how you can help with social selling in their business, as an individual or as a company, what's the best way for people to learn more about you?
So my company is DLA Ignite. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Timothy or Tim Hughes. And if you want to buy a copy of my book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. It's the second edition with the yellow cover, is available on Amazon worldwide.
Awesome. Wonderful. So all that information obviously will be in the description of this episode. So anyone listening or watching, you are not going to have to go too far as connecting with Tim on LinkedIn and even purchasing his book. So Tim, final question before we sign off today. What does success truly mean to you?
Good question. For me, I've actually, for success for me, I lost my father a year ago. And I learned two things as I came out of the funeral, which I didn't know about him. And those two things was he had spent his life helping people. And I didn't know this. There was loads of people came up to me and they shook my hand and they said, if it wasn't for your father, I wouldn't be where I am today. Your father helped me. And there was a number of people that dialed in on Zoom as well. And that for me, I'm basically taking that on so that I have two values. One is what I want to do is help people. And that's a way of taking them forward. The other thing is legacy. And what I want to do is I want to leave a legacy, which is why I've written 3 books and I'm going to write more books and I'm making time to do that. And so for success for me currently is helping people and creating a legacy as well.
I love everything that you said. And sometimes when those things happen to us and for us in those dark moments, there are bright lights, again,
yes,
shining to teach us a lesson and understand that, you can leave your legacy while you're still living. And I think that's the important thing from that. And, obviously appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that.
Thank you. And can you imagine if he'd been there and people had, and he'd seen them walking up saying, shaking my hand saying, if it wasn't for your dad,
yeah,
I wouldn't. What a wonderful thing to experience.
Lives are changed. It's, one person at a time, and you don't know how much one individual can impact the lives of many. And I think that's, your father's legacy is a great example. And obviously you're carrying that on now as well, which is also a wonderful, wonderful thing. And Tim, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to be here today. Just grateful for the conversation and you and everything that you're doing for not only just the world, but the business world and what you're teaching. So thank you again.
Thank you, Scott. Been great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So everyone, again, wherever you're listening to and from, please let us know what you loved most about the episode. If you're happy to be listening on iTunes, please subscribe. Please leave a rating and review. Same thing if you're on Spotify. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days. Love and gratitude. And I'll talk to you next time.